Hi, my name is Ramna and my personal blog is .netiq.com. You can visit my blog for more WCF videos and .NET videos. From this screenshot onwards, I started covering the WCF 4.1 new features. At least a good thing is in 4.0 they try to simplify the configuration. If you see in 3.0 framework or 3.5 framework, configuring the WCF service is a bit tricky and complicated. At least in 4.0 they tried certain extent to simplify the configuration. How they simplified? Just simple, if you are not specifying any configuration to your service in 4.0, they will take the default value. That's it. That means on what is the default configuration and how they apply the default configuration and what basis they apply means uh, they have a default set of the configurations. For example, if your service you want to access through HTTP protocol, then HTTP protocol has a default binding and default endpoints and default behavior configuration. If it is NetTCP, it has a different set of the configuration. If it is another protocol, NetPipe, it has a different set of the. If it is MSMQ, it has a different set of the configuration. Each protocol it has its own set of the default configuration. If you are not specifying any configuration to your service and you want to access your service through HTTP protocol, it by default it goes and picks the default configuration, it applies to your service. If you come into the HTTP protocol, HTTP itself, it has many bindings. Like you can, it has a basic HTTP binding, it has a WS HTTP binding, it has a web HTTP binding, it has a WS dual HTTP binding. It has more. HTTP itself, it has more bindings. So, but the default one is basic HTTP binding. So your requirement is not the basic HTTP binding. You want to use a WS HTTP or web HTTP binding, then you need to change your configuration. There you have no option. If your requirement is satisfied with the basic HTTP binding, you are good. You no need to specify any configuration until you want to change any behavior related or timeouts, anything. Otherwise, you are good with. You don't need to specify any configuration. Whatever the .NET, the default values, it's mentioned in the framework, it's going to apply to your service and you can access the service. You are good. In this screenshot, at least I'm trying to show you if I didn't specify any configuration to my service and I try to host in a self-host, and what the default configuration it is applying, and if I host the same service in IaaS side and not mentioning any configuration, what the default values it is applying, how to do that, I'm trying to cover those things. As usual, I'm taking the employee service project as the sample to explain this concept. In my previous screenshots also I take the employee service as the example here also, but the change is I took the Visual Studio 2010. I just copied the same service and everything in 4.0 framework. If you see the iEmployee, the service contract, no change. It has the 3 operations, and employee service, the implementation of the service contract, here also there is no change, the same as usual. And employee is the data contract I am using in my service contract as a means input and somewhere is output. This is the service. If you notice here, there is no app.config, nothing. And I am trying to host the employee service as a self-host. So I took employee host project and added this employee service project as a reference. I am making this project as a startup project. Okay. Here if you see, and one more thing, in the employee host also there is no app.config file. So there is no configuration here. And I am trying to do the self-host. For that I just created the instance of the service host. Here I am trying to host the employee service. That means that the implementation of iEmployee service class. So that's why I specified the class employee service class type of the service host is hosting the employee service. I just specified the URI, like I want to access this service using the HTTP protocol and the NetTCP protocol. If you see, whatever the name you want, you can give. It's not compulsion to use the same employee service or something. Whatever the name you want, you can give it. That is going to map with your employee service. Here the NetTCP, I just gave the same name but with a different protocol, different port number. Okay, I am opening the host, and here I am trying to print the default values what it is taking. So each service endpoint in the host, I am trying to loop through it, and each service endpoint, what the binding name it is using. Since it's HTTP protocol, but default what the binding it is using, and what is the address and the contract it is. The address and contract we know that because address we gave, the contract we know, but internally what the binding it is using, based on the binding the configuration it uses, right? The default configuration. I'm just trying to print the what the default values it is using. I'm running this service. If you see here the name it is the name of the binding is basic HTTP binding, address is the HTTP because we gave the same address and it is giving the same address. The contract is iEmployee. Here the net TCP binding, it is using the net TCP binding for the net.tcp protocol. And one more simple change, I am going to do this for same service. In iEmployee, means I added one more service contract just for testing purpose. This is iCustomer, it has only add customer operation. I am implementing the same service this service contract in the place where we implemented the iEmployee also. That means that employee service is going to implementing the iCustomer. Means it has already iEmployee is implemented, and we are going to implement the iCustomer. Why I am doing, I will tell you. Why we are implementing in the same class? Why we are not going this different class? I want to show how the default configuration they are implemented. I will tell you 1 minute. Sorry. Console dot write line adding customer. I just implemented the iCustomer to the same class. Why I am doing this? There is a question. If you see here, I mentioned the type of this service is hosted the employee service. That means employee service implementation. Earlier it has only iEmployee service contract is implemented. Now this same class is implemented the iCustomer also. That means that it has two services. But here you are trying to access through my first service. That means that how the default configuration is applying. Just after this change, I am running the same project. See here, earlier we have only 2 records, now we have 4 records. Same for the HTTP, same URL, we have the 2 rows, basic HTTP binding, basic HTTP, but the contract is different. iEmployee has the one set of configuration and iCustomer has the another set of. The same thing they repeated with the net TCP binding also. iEmployee has a separate set and iCustomer has. Internally it is based on the service contracts you are implementing, it's the configuration is also they are creating. Now we saw that how to the self-hosting service without configuration, what the default values it's applying and what the default values is taking at the HTTP protocol and NetTCP protocol. We saw that how to host the same service in the for IaaS with the .svs file. I will show you, and what exactly the configuration it is taking I will show you. I already created a employee service.web project and it has the employee service.svs file. I deleted the code behind file because I'm not using that, and I just mapped the I added the reference of the employee service project to employee service.web, and I just mentioned the service is employee service.employee service. That means that the same class, I just refer the same class where it has the implementation of iCustomer and iEmployee. So the same class I referred in .svs file. So because if you are hosting in IaaS, you need a .svs file. So that's why we created a svs file and we just map the service as the service employee service class. So here if you notice this, we have a f.config file, but if you notice here, we create all the configuration related to WCF service in between the system.service model. Here if you notice, nothing is there, just it's a empty tags we have, but no configuration we defined here. That's it, that's simple. If you run this service, we can see the configuration. Let me set a startup page and run this. Oh sure, because metadata is not publishing metadata. If your metadata is not publishing, means you cannot see the what the service has and what the contracts and how to means you cannot see those information. Since there is no configuration we defined in the web.config, so the metadata is also by default, the metadata is not exposing until you specify something in the web.config. So since the metadata is not exposed, so we are not seeing the metadata. They are saying that you change your metadata, means as you change your web.config file to make enable the metadata. So I'm just trying, I have something in my notepad already to save the time. I'm just specifying the generally in the service behavior configuration is either like a service level or endpoint level. Here I just defining the generic behavior. That means that whatever the services you implemented in the same project is going to apply the same behavior configuration. Like here I'm mentioning the service metadata is enabling. Service metadata, the HTTP get enabled, if the attribute is going to enable your metadata exchanger. That means you can view the metadata. This is not the service level, it is for all the service we are hosting in the same project. So if suppose if it is service level, you need to give a name, and that name should map with your service configuration. But here we are not specifying any name, just we are simply saying that the behavior configuration. That means that this setting is applied to all the services hosted in the same project, means it is implemented in the same project. I am running again. This time you see this configuration, means at least you see the WSDL and what the operations it has and what the contracts it has. You can see that. And one more thing, here I didn't mention any configuration. It has just I am turning on the metadata, and other than that I didn't specify any service contracts or any endpoint URL. I didn't do anything. Wow, oh, we got the, yeah, if you see here now, this time we got the service definition and a WSDL also. Yeah, if you see here, the WSDL has the operations and iCustomer related operations and iEmployee related operations and what it is returning and everything, it has the information. So simply if you want to use this service, you can refer the service refer in your client project, and it's as well regular stuff. But only thing we try to show here is nothing, means we don't have any configuration, but still you have hosted the service as a self-host and you hosted the service in IIS without any configuration. Internally it is taking the default configuration anyhow. If you are not, means again I am repeating the same, if you are not, means your requirement is not matching with the default configuration, then you need to override that, means either mission.config level or your application level. Again you have to define the same. It is only useful when your requirement is matching with the default bindings and default configuration. I hope it explained you the how they simplified the configuration in 4.0. In my next video, in my next screenshot, I am trying to cover the another topic, another new feature, WCF 4.1 new feature. Thank you.